Day 2 of training camp, another strong performance by Jalen Hurts, but what about that defense he's playing against? I'm going to discuss that and more with Les Bowen next on the PHLY Eagles Show. Good afternoon and welcome to a Thursday edition of the PHLY Eagles Show. I'm Zach Berman here with Les Bowen. I say Thursday edition, but this time of year with training camp, it's all running together. I don't need to tell you that. You had a tweet out, year 26. Is that right?
23.
23.
Yeah,
I apologize. Year
That's
23 of Eagles training camp. So you know this time of year well. Les, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here.
I'm fresh off the practice field, and to give everyone just a quick update, because we'll get into some big picture talk, but then also from what happened today, like I mentioned in the open, Jalen Hurts, another strong practice. The ball barely hit the ground. He was efficient. He got rid of the ball quickly. That's what jumps out.
Yeah.
He's moving well. He's making good decisions with the ball. You don't want to read too much into 2 days, but it's worth noting because during the spring and the limited sample size we had, Jalen did not look that good, and he's looked really good so far. I'm curious your take on that in a second, but also A.J. Brown, play of the day, down the right sideline. Jalen Hurts hits A.J. Brown. Brown beats Darius Slay. It's like ho-hum now. You just expect that from A.J. Brown. On the injury front, Landon Dickerson was limited, lacerated toe. Second day of that. He's progressing, but still not in full teamwork. Oren Burks missed practice today, and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. left practice at the end. It looked like a scare, but as I was driving in here, I saw reported by the Inquirer that it was just cramps, so should be okay. So that's we'll intersperse some of what happened in practice in this discussion, and we're going to get into the defense specifically. And you have a piece out on allphly.com right now that you wrote yesterday. You were at practice yesterday, but let's start with Jalen because typically the quarterback's the big angle. What did you see from Jalen yesterday that either gave you optimism about how he looks in this Kellen Moore offense, or that made you think, all right, let's wait and see?
Well, I thought he looked good. I didn't see anything bad yesterday. I saw a couple things I did notice is there were a lot of design quarterback runs yesterday. We were never sure how much of that was still going to be, and we don't know yet how much of that's going to be in the offense, but it certainly looks like they're setting that up to be something they still do. And the other thing I noticed was dumping off to Saquon Barkley several times. I mean, we're really projecting here, but maybe he feels a little better about that than he did his options that he had previously, when people are covered. Maybe he'll do that pretty, almost like Carson Wentz used to look for Ertz or something like that.
In your experience, do you find that there's a correlation between training camp performance and in-season performance? And I ask that because in 2020, for instance, Carson Wentz did not look good. Right? And he did not look good that season.
That's a good example.
2017, Carson looked really good, and he had an outstanding season. Now, there's probably examples in between there, but at what point this summer do you think it's safe to say, all right, Jalen's got this figured out? And at what point would you say there might be some reason for concern here?
Boy, I don't really make sweeping conclusions off of preseason and training camp. You're right. Sometimes you can tell. It's easier to tell what's going on if there's like catastrophic injuries or if people are yelling at each other, or, if they're stopping practice and waving their arms and pointing to the sheet saying, no, we want to do this. I mean, that makes it a little easier. But I've seen bad years with good training camps, and, I don't know. It's I I know everybody says this, but the joint practices with the Patriots, that will mean something to me, even though the Patriots are not a good team, I don't think. That always shows you something, I think. Although, I think I mentioned this to somebody else, the last one I was at was a couple years ago in Cleveland.
Yes.
And I found that one very frustrating because both teams had guys that were a little banged up.
Sure, Myles Garrett, I remember. Yep.
We kept expecting these big matchups that never happened.
Yep.
You know, so it ended up not being as revelatory as I had hoped it would be.
I was envious of you on that trip because you went to Jason Kelsey's old stomping grounds. You asked Jason for his favorite bar, and
it was it was really weird. I had an idea of doing a story if there was a place in that area that had like a Jason Kelsey jersey up on the wall and everybody there knew Jason, I could write a story.
I'm all into those stories. I like those.
So I went there. He told me a place. He said, I don't think they have a jersey up on the, because this is before he really hit it big. And he was like, I don't think they have a jersey up or anything, but I like this place. So I go there, and it's there's not very many people there that night. It was a midweek night, and I'm having dinner at the bar there, and everybody's nice, but I'm thinking, well, this isn't going to be, I can't really get a story out of this, which I didn't. But I hear this booming voice behind me, God, Les Bowen's here. And it's Jason. He's come in to say hi and sit down for a minute.
That's on brand, too. Yeah, Jason to go to his favorite bar in Cleveland Heights.
That's a very nice little town, by the way.
Cleveland Heights?
Yeah, very picturesque, big trees, nice houses, cute little downtown.
Yeah. I've been to a lot of these players' hometowns. Have never been to Jason Kelsey's hometown. So next time I'm in Cleveland, I need to stop by. But speaking about Kelsey, Cam Jurgens, it was interesting watching him today. Kelsey-esque in terms of making, he was blocking downfield. You really saw him on his feet. He's a natural center, and he said that he called himself an undersized guard last year, which he was, right? He said he really didn't need to change his body much this offseason. But what I'm fascinated to see here is that Jalen Hurts made a point yesterday, and you were there, I was saying that he wants control at the line of scrimmage this year, that he's deferred that to Jason Kelsey in the past. But now, he's in communication with Cam Jurgens about it. Cam says it's like something that they continue to work through. This dynamic of Cam Jurgens, you can't necessarily ascertain a center's performance in these training camp sessions without pads on, as I think it was Jordan Mailata today said they're basically in like shirts and underwear.
Yeah.
But you can say the athletic traits, and B, you can also see like the way he's working with the other guys.
When they talk about the adjustments at the line, they're talking about the blocking, right? I mean, Kelsey wasn't changing the play or anything.
No, he was, but he was making the calls.
Yeah.
He was making the calls at the line of scrimmage, and if memory serves, and I feel pretty strongly about this, this was actually changed during the Howard Mudd era from the quarterback to the center. So that was 2011, is that right?
Probably.
And because I recall specifically talking to Michael Vick in 2012, and Vic said this was something that affected him. Right when
he didn't make the blocking calls.
Yeah, that he was used to that, and then they kind of went to the center there, right? And Jason Kelsey, obviously, the knowledge that he has, the relationship that he had with Jeff Stoutland, that's been his responsibility, and Jalen was deferential to him, but Jalen very much wants to take over that this year.
And I think Hank Fraley did that for Donovan McNabb. I'm pretty sure.
Interesting.
And then Jamal Jackson after Hank. I don't know if Donovan ever. Maybe they went back and forth on it, but I don't really remember. But yeah, it's part of Jalen taking ownership of the whole thing, I guess. If he does a good job with it, that'll be another check mark for him.
On the topic of the offensive line, speaking to Jordan Mailata today, you saw yesterday they had some pre-snap penalties, and this was something that Jordan and Cam Jurgens particularly took umbrage with, right? They were not happy about it. They ran gezzers after practice. So they ran sprints after practice. And this was something that Jordan and Cam initiated. Lane Johnson, kind of the veteran of the group, he was doing that. Jordan said this was all about that group kind of playing to a standard, the standard that's been set with the offensive line.
Yeah.
And he thought they really cleaned up the pre-snap penalties today. But I bring this up because I don't mean to make every show and every week about replacing Jason Kelce. But this is something that's on fans' minds.
Yeah, it's a huge thing.
And Jordan Mailata really is taking on more of a leadership responsibility.
Yeah, then that's really great to see, because that was the biggest thing you worry about. The on-field performance, the center matters, but the center isn't, the left tackle or the quarterback or anything like that. But the leadership and the institutional knowledge and things like that are what you really miss more, I think, even than the physicality of Jason Kelce, the quickness. Now, we don't know how the sneak play, the push or whatever you want to call it, is going to go without. Jason was so good at getting low there and, using his leverage. But Juergens was there. I'm sure they talked. I don't think Juergens is dumb. So, maybe it won't be affected very much.
As far as the depth chart today on the offensive line, and we'll get to the defense in a bit, but on the offensive line, same as it was on day one, because Landon Dickerson did not participate in the team drills. So Mekhi Becton continued to play left guard in Dickerson's place. Tyler Steen remains first-team right guard. I don't think in the short term we'll see any change there at right guard. I do think they're taking a long look at Mekhi Becton.
Did Mekhi manage to keep his Gatorade down today?
It certainly seemed that way, yes. Now, I was watching from behind the end zone today. That was the vantage point that I wanted. This might be a shock to the audience. I'm not particularly tall. So sometimes when I'm on the sideline, unless I'm far behind the ball, I might miss something. When I'm behind the end zone, they're coming toward me. I have a better chance of seeing things that way, although sometimes you get a better look of the defense than the offensive personnel. But it certainly seemed like Mekhi Becton kept his lunch or his liquids at least in his stomach that we chronicled yesterday. Bo was really into the regurgitation report a day ago.
Well, I won't belabor that, but it was that was right near me, and I was like, man, that's a lot of Gatorade.
And I don't want to belabor the Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni dynamic, but I'm always interested in your perspective. And I say veteran reporter with much respect because you've seen firsthand different quarterbacks here, different quarterback coach dynamics. This is a topic that I wrote about on allphly.com. Anyone who covers the team has been writing about this, has been talking about this. Do you think this is much ado about nothing? Is this summer drama, if you will, or do you think this is something that we're going to have to monitor?
Oh, we'll have to monitor it. But here, what he said yesterday was pretty much what I think, which is that when things are going good, the quarterback-coach relationship is very good.
Yep.
When things are going bad, and especially when things are going bad with the offense, if the head coach is running the offense, they're going to be ticked off at each other.
Yep.
As long as it doesn't go any deeper than that, you can get to a situation where maybe the quarterback loses respect for the coach.
Sure.
Or the coach loses respect for the quarterback.
More confidence in.
Yeah, and is going around telling his buddies, they expect me to win with this guy. I don't think we're anywhere near that point yet.
Sure.
I don't know, but I don't see any indication of it. I think when you get to that point, Howie Roseman or somebody has to be smart enough to know that that's not going to work, and you have to get rid of one or the other of them. But again, I don't see any indication of it. I think it's just what Jalen said. You're not on the same page. It was a frustrating situation last year. Now, I wish, and I think I said this on Twitter or X, with the way they do this now with the press conferences, everybody's shouting questions at Jalen.
And you could barely hear.
Yeah, and Jalen especially. Jalen's like this from the microphone.
Yes.
Nobody from the Eagles moves it up or anything. And they've got us next to fans that are screaming for some reason. So, but anyway, you can't just say, okay, Jalen, I get that you say everything's fine. What the hell was that you said before? Why did you word it that way? What did you mean? And also, in the day or two after that, why didn't you issue some sort of clarification when this was getting wildly,
Sure.
Blowing up all over the place? But there was no opportunity to do anything like that.
Yeah, they did let that hang in the air, and then yesterday was his chance to kind of clarify or provide more perspective on it. I do like to be relatively transparent with the audience about this. Like it's something I've been thinking quite a bit about in terms of I don't want to belabor it in the sense that I wrote this in the lead of my column today. Nothing makes football observers more like marriage counselors than the coach-quarterback dynamic. Like there's a fascination with it. And there's also this misconception that you have to like really like each other. Right?
Yeah, no, you don't.
Exactly.
I mean, Belichick and Brady.
100%. Exactly.
I can name, Aaron Rodgers and anybody he ever played for. That's just not how it works. I think the longer a relationship goes on, the more complicated it gets.
Precisely.
It's easy to like the guy right off the bat, but as years go by, they're a little, he did this in this game, and that really, put me in a bad spot. And these grievances build up sometimes. But again, if things are going well, it's not something you have to worry about.
Yeah, but too, like that's also why I think it's worth bringing up, because you also don't want to be the reporter who, at the end of the season, if things go sour, and all this comes out about a coach and a quarterback butting heads, or if there's some type of disagreement, right? And then your head was in the sand saying, "Hey, there's nothing to look at here.
And
this is just petty drama." Yeah.
Years ago, I was late on the Carson Wentz thing. I kind of saw it from his perspective for a long time, and I still think, 2018 and 2019 and 2020, the quality of the offense around him, especially the weapons, kept going down.
Yeah.
And
Travis Fulgham, Greg Ward. Yeah.
Everything was his fault. But I was a little stubborn in that regard. I didn't really understand the dynamic. Carson was a very difficult guy to get much of a read on.
Sure.
You didn't get to talk to him at all off of the podium. It just took me a while to kind of get inside that, because when he first arrived, he seemed like the greatest guy in the world.
Yeah. But that's like, as a reporter, you really want to kind of have a sense of what's happening, as opposed to trying to figure out what happened.
Right.
Because when you're playing catch up with what happened, there's a lot of different versions to it. If you're living it as it happens, you tend to have much better sense of what's real and what's not. So I imagine this is something we'll be discussing quite a bit throughout the year, but I agree with your central thesis there. If they're winning, everything's fine. If they're losing, it's certainly reason to dissect. We're going to get into the defense in a bit, but before we do, I want to tell everybody about our friends at Miller Lite, because a lot has changed over the years. One thing that hasn't, Les Bowen covering training camp. Another thing that hasn't, the great taste of Miller Lite. Another thing that hasn't changed is that it's less filling. So what is the best thing about the original light beer? Miller Lite sparked this debate in 1975, and we still have not settled it, because there's that great taste, which it's a terrific light beer, but also it's less filling. So you're able to drink undebatable quality, because Miller Lite keeps it simple, with great taste and only 96 calories. It's the beer that strips away everything you don't need and holds on to what matters most. A light beer that tastes like beer, less filling and only 96 calories. The original light beer since 1975. You don't have to choose what's best. Miller Lite has great taste and is less filling. Tastes like Miller time. To get Miller Lite delivered right to your door, visit MillerLite.com/PHLY Birds, or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories per 12 ounces. Fewer calories and carbs than premium regular beer. And we will also tell you about Bet Parks Casino. And we're talking about Bet Parks Casino because it is the perfect way for after work get-togethers. Date nights or girls' nights out or guys' nights out, whatever you want to do. You can sip on tantalizing drinks and soak up the warm weather, good vibes right now at Parks Casino. Parks Casino, this is how you win. You can enjoy $5 drafts of Forged Stout, Victory Seasonal, or Parks Pills. Enjoy $5 glasses of, you're testing my wine knowledge here, Albertani Cabernet. Is that right? It's a great cab, I imagine. You can enjoy the drink of summer, which is $5 Twisted Tea, Frozen Whiskey, Arnold Palmer's, plus feast on flavored packed $5 small plates of braised short rib sliders, hot honey chicken sliders, or rotisserie chicken flatbreads. I'm getting hungry just reading it. Parks Casino has 3,200 state-of-the-art slots, 115 live table games, a beautiful poker room, plus a collection of incredible award-winning restaurants. You can also go see Tiffany Haddish on September 27th if you're a Tiffany Haddish fan. Tickets for all shows are at parkscasino.com. Visit parkscasino.com. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Parks Casino. This is how you win. We also, we're going to kind of talk about the defense in a minute, but the future is bright with Shady Rays. And let's put on our rose-colored glasses, or sometimes, as Eagles people who talk about the Eagles say, they're Roseman-colored glasses, and explain to the people why the future is bright for the Eagles. Brought to you by Shady Rays. Head to shadyrays.com and use code PHLY at checkout, or 35% off polarized sunglasses. So I'll pose this question to you: what, from your perspective, I'm putting you on the spot here, what's the biggest reason that the future is bright for the Eagles?
The biggest reason. They have as good a weapon array as there is in the NFL, exactly. I think, except maybe 49ers, but that's, other than that, there's nothing that meets their bunch of weapons. Yeah,
you hit it on the head, and you mentioned it earlier when talking about Carson's weapons, and I feel like every time I make this point, I need to text Greg Ward an apology, because I always use him as an example. But I covered a year when Greg Ward, Travis Fulgham, and Jalen Reagor were their top receivers, right? And then you look at a wide receiver core that has A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and you're like, and by the way, you think back to the early McNabb years when it was Todd Pinkston, and you had Torrance Small, you had Charles Johnson, James Thrash, Kevin Curtis was their big signing, right?
Jermaine Douglas.
Yeah, and so to have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith in their mid-20s, signed to long-term deals, they're in a, if you want a reason why the future is bright, if you want to put on those Roseman-colored sunglasses, this is why. It's because they have outstanding skill players.
Yeah, plus Barkley and Goddard. We didn't even mention them. But, yeah, it's as good a skill group as I've ever seen in the time I've been around the team.
The group that needs to defend those skill players is the defense. Yes. And we're going to get into that here. You wrote about the defense on allphly.com today, and I thought it was good perspective because there are a lot of changes here. It's Vic Fangio's unit. You had a chance to speak to guys like Darius Slay, some of the leaders on the team. What insight did you glean from the defenders yesterday?
It was interesting. It was a little different perspective than I had going into this. My feeling has kind of been, well, they've really fixed a lot of things here. They've shored up this, they've shored up that. And maybe it's just these two guys, but Slay and Graham really emphasized what a transitional time this is for the defense. Not just Vic Fangio coming in. They didn't really make a big deal out of his scheme being different or anything like that, but just that leadership with Fletcher Cox gone. Slay, for the first time really since I've been around him, talked a lot about the young guys, and he even said something like, it's not going to be long until they replace him. He's 33, and I think there's a very good chance.
To be 33, right?
Yeah, I would love to be 33. That was a long time ago.
It was a fun year.
That was about 1989 for me. But anyway, Slay, I wouldn't be surprised if this is his last year here. I don't know what the contract ramifications are of that, but I think given the fact that they drafted two guys high, I just think, and they've got other guys that they've been, Kelly Ringo and guys like that they've been bringing along, McPherson, Isaiah Rodgers, obviously they have under contract. It's a transitional time, I guess, to get back to my central point. the edge rush with Huff is going to, as the leader supposedly of that effort, is going to be different. The tackles are very, very different without Fletch. We don't talk that much about the linebacking core because we don't see it really having been greatly improved from last year, but it's different guys pretty much than last year. Even if they're the same skill level, it's different guys. And the secondary is going to look very, very different, especially if Sidney Brown isn't ready for the opener, which I doubt sincerely that he'll be, having torn an ACL in January. So this is really, it's not just a shoring up of the defense, which was kind of how I was looking at it. It's trying to get a whole new group together and on the same page, and that is a bigger deal maybe than I thought.
So a few depth chart things there while we talk about the defense. PHLY Ringo was the first cornerback with the starters today opposite Darius Slay. Yesterday it was Isaiah Rodgers. I point that out because it's not Quinyon Mitchell right now, right?
Yeah.
It's Rodgers and Ringo.
And I'm not surprised. I mean, a rookie is a rookie, especially in a fairly complex defense.
Sure.
There used to be a time, I don't know if this is still true, but rookie corners really, you didn't look for, it's just like with a rookie defensive end, you don't look for 15 sacks.
Sure.
And you don't look for standout starter play on a Super Bowl contender from a rookie corner. But I know that's changing, and I know he's very well thought of, but I'll be a little bit surprised if he ends up at least week 1.
Sure.
Week 10, maybe not. But, I didn't expect Mitchell to come in there and be the number one guy right off the bat.
I thought again, it's day 2, right? We're going to be doing a day 12 podcast, and I'll be in my car driving home listening back to day 2, and I'll be laughing at like, why am I making such a big deal about the depth chart here? But, I do think Quinyon Mitchell should be the front runner to win that job.
You think? Okay.
He was their highest grade cornerback in the draft, and this isn't them just telling you that. It's rare you draft a guy who's the first player drafted at his position, because it shows you right there what they thought of him.
But there were 12 teams that had a chance to draft him who did. I mean, it's not like he's the number 1 overall pick or something. I'm not disparaging Quinyon Mitchell at all. I'm just saying that I don't see. I mean, Isaiah Rodgers was a pretty good starting corner before he got into gambling, and he's been in the league.
He got into gambling too.
He's been in the league a while, I mean, I just don't. I don't know if they want to. It a lot depends on how they want to do it. I mean, the talent obviously, Quinyon Mitchell obviously has the talent, but do they want to? With a corner, do you want him to take his lumps early, or do you want to kind of ease him in? I'm more of an ease in guy.
Yeah, but and PHLY Ringo, who I was bullish on when they drafted him, because they drafted him at age 20, 6'2", 207, 4.38 40, right? Just tools you don't have. He's actually younger than Quinyon Mitchell.
Really?
And that's, I mean, Quinyon Mitchell was a 4-year player from the MAC, right? And so Quinyon Mitchell's already 23.
That's another factor in this.
That's true. The adjustment curve there. So I am, I know people want to know how PHLY looked. PHLY looked fine. He moves well. The question with him is often the change of direction component of it. He didn't have to do much of that from what I was observing today. Again, I'm watching the whole field. You don't have the film to watch, Sean, so you're not keying in on one player. And I was focusing actually more on Bryce Huff today, which we'll get to in a bit. But so when I was seeing some of those, I didn't think he was egregious in coverage, and I'm fascinated to see how that pans out. It's also worth pointing out that at linebacker, Zach Bond, for the second consecutive day, just like it was during the spring, Zach Bond is first up at linebacker. Zach Bond's right there next to Devin White. And this is year 3 for Nakobe Dean. This time last year, Nakobe Dean was the top guy. It certainly seems like this is Bond's job to lose right now.
Well, Dean missed some spring, right?
He did, yeah. He was coming back from foot injuries.
Yeah. Well, he's always coming back from something. And that's something he really has to put behind him. But Bond, not being an everyday beat writer kind of guy anymore. So Bond was with the Saints, right?
Yes.
And he was more of an edge rusher?
So he was actually more of a special teams guy.
Okay.
And and he wants to be more of an edge rusher. That's kind of the interesting thing.
That's not what they want him to do.
No, and so it's interesting that you bring that up, Les, because when he was drafted, or I'm sorry, when he signed here, he was excited about the possibility of rushing the quarterback more, right? Getting back to what he did at Wisconsin.
I remember that. So I thought maybe he had done that with the Saints.
So he did do that a bit. But he was a backup with the Saints. He was a part-time player,
right?
Mostly special teams. He's a guy the Eagles targeted on day one. And when the Eagles signed him, talking to people behind the scenes there, they thought that there was a lot of talent there, that he could almost be used like Andrew Van Ginkel in that defense last year. And Van Ginkel was an edge rusher. So I thought that might be the case. And then when Vic Fangio brought up, I asked Vic about the linebackers during the spring, and the first name he brought up was Zach Bond. And everyone's kind of looking around like, really? And then I
noticed that too.
And then we watched practice, and Zach Bond's out there. And now here we are in training camp. And because you were saying, all right, Nakobe Dean's coming back from injury during the spring. Maybe in summer, Dean will be first up. And now here it is, 2 days in a row, and it's Bond. Now, Dean has mixed in with the ones. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. even mixed in with the ones today a bit. But I do put, I lend credence, if you will, to who's the first guy up at this, because you go into the day with those lineups, right? And so that's what stood out to me.
Well, it's really interesting because coaches have guys like that that they want to acquire and they want to play, and sometimes they're right. Sometimes they have the exact right idea about who a guy is and what he can do for them. Other times, not so much. And I'm drawing a Biden-esque blank here. The undersized middle linebacker they got from the Falcons to replace Jeremiah Trotter.
Mark Semino.
Yep. Jim Johnson loved Mark Semino, thought he was going to be an all-pro for the Eagles. He was that. And it just didn't happen. He wasn't big enough. He wasn't all that fast or instinctive. He was a nice guy. He had, I think, blocked a punt in a playoff game for the Falcons and helped them beat the Packers in a big playoff game. So he was, he had a little bit of juice going into free agency, but he was not really a starting quality Super Bowl contender middle linebacker. He could do a lot of things. When David Akers got hurt, I think he kicked an extra point or a field goal or something, but not Jeremiah Trotter.
I'm trying to be selectively revealing on this show sometimes. My quick Mark Semino story is Mark Semino introduced me to sushi.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I had not eaten sushi before, and Mark Semino said that was his favorite thing to eat. And so I went to Gennardi's that night back then.
Oh, right. Yeah, and that's where they have the best sushi.
And I remember leaving NovaCare and going to Gennardi's and getting a spicy tuna roll. And ever since then, that was my introduction to sushi. And I married someone whose favorite meal is sushi, and so now we a lot of sushi.
Yeah.
And it's no disrespect to the Gennardi sushi, but I've had sushi that's a bit better than that sushi. But Mark Semino introduced me to sushi.
Great guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. He played, I think, like 9-on-9 high school football. I remember that too. I did a story on him. So we'll be.
But coaches get this idea of what somebody is or what they could be. And I think it's particularly dangerous when it's what they could be rather than what they've done, previously. And in this case, it's again, a projection of what this guy can be. So we'll see. But Vic Fangio, we certainly have to give him a lot of rope here.
And so the centerpiece of Vic Fangio's defense is going to be Jalen Carter. And so at today's practice, Jalen Carter had a play late in practice where I don't have the lineman who he did it to, but he just pushed the guy off him and was able to penetrate the backfield. He's their best player from where I stand on defense, and he knows that he needs to take on an even larger role this year. Actually, his emphasis this offseason was conditioning, and it wasn't conditioning necessarily because he was out of shape, although he did he did regress, or at least his production plateaued late in the year.
Certainly did.
But even more so, he's going to play a lot of snaps. And Jordan Davis made a reference when I spoke to him after practice that if it was up to Vic Fangio, these guys would be playing 10 snaps in a row, right? And Nick Sirianni maybe wants them to play 6 instead of 10. But the point is Vic's background has not been rotating the way Jim Schwartz has. Rotating.
That came up yesterday in some of the questioning. Yeah, and that's really interesting. I hadn't thought that through very much. But, yeah, the rotating thing here goes all the way back to Jim Johnson.
Yep.
And Andy Reid used to talk about throwing fastballs at the defense. They would bring in guys like Indy Kalu and Derek Burgess, and they wanted fresh legs in there. You're right. That is, I guess, that's not Fangio's way. And given what we saw the second half of last season, and a point can be made that there were a lot of snaps being. It was chicken and egg, but were there a lot of snaps being played because they couldn't stop anybody? Or were they were just in shootout type games against good offenses, and that wore them down, But you can't have that happen again this year. Absolutely.
And I don't want to put you on the spot as far as evaluating the defensive line from one practice, but you had an interesting quote in your story from Brandon Graham, essentially saying it's about these defensive linemen.
Yeah, he's kind of in a almost ambassadorial role now. He was like, it's about 90, 98, 93 up front,
exactly.
And it is. I mean, and Milt Williams, 4th year now. And everybody likes him. Everybody thinks he has potential. But he hasn't really, made himself more
Last year was the year he needed to take that leap, and he didn't do it. Yeah.
So, there's a lot to be proved here. There really is. And that was something else that Brandon said. We've got a lot of guys with a lot to prove.
Yeah. So as far as Jalen Carter, like it's a limited sample size, but I have seen what fans want to know about him, which is like he is a force there. And practices actually benefit him. Like I recall talking to someone with a different team last year who was saying that like in one-on-ones, this guy's not like he is so hard to stop, and just his sheer strength, the athleticism that he has. You're going to see a better Jalen Carter this year. I don't think expectations are too high. In talking to Jalen, he's embracing those like he recognizes that, he wants that, he knows he can be a premium player. And I actually think more of the question is the guy next to him.
Right. Well, I was just going to say, the deal there is, there were times when Fletcher Cox, when the average writer or fan, would watch a game and not notice Fletcher Cox that much and think, well, Fletch didn't really do much. But a lot of times he was taking on 2 guys so that somebody else could do something. Well, I think that's also the dynamic with Jalen Carter, except Jordan Davis hasn't really. There have been a few games here and there where Jordan Davis has really been a dominating player, which is what he was drafted to be.
Exactly.
And that needs to happen, especially if Carter's getting doubled. Davis has to be a monster.
Sure.
And I want to see that. Javon Hargrave was really good at that when Fletch. That was the best guy Fletch played with to take advantage of teams really keying on Fletch. For some reason, it isn't easy for some linemen to make that, to realize I've just got one guy here. I've got to beat him because the better player next to me, they've got him. I need to get there, and it's a mindset, I think.
I want to have deeper Jordan Davis and Bryce Huff discussion. We're going to have that in a minute. Before we do, I'm going to tell you again about Shady Rays, okay? Because we talked before about how the future is bright, but you know what else is bright? The sun. And I was out there on the practice field today, and I did not have sunglasses. And I said, you know what I need? I need my Shady Rays, because get ready for the season ahead with quality shades built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that won't break the bank. Shady Rays is an independent sunglass company offering a world-class product that's rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. I'm trying to get 300,000 people to read our stuff at allphly.com and rate us 5 stars. They've already done that with Shady Rays. Their shades have durable frames and crystal clear optics, making them the perfect choice for all outdoor adventures, including watching football practice. They have hundreds of options to choose from, so you're bound to find the perfect pair to match your style. They probably have a style in your favorite team's colors. Shady Rays wants us to tell you about our experience wearing Shady Rays. Mine's pretty obvious. It's football practice, right? I'm out there for 3 hours. I'm there at 10 a.m. And the sun's coming up. On a sunny day, you're trying to make out whether it's Jordan Davis or Jalen Carter making the play. And if you're squinting, you're going to have a hard time doing that. And that's where Shady Rays comes in handy. Plus, if your shades ever go missing or take an unexpected hit, don't sweat it. They have the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair is backed by lost or broken replacements. If you don't love your shades, exchange for a new pair or return worry-free within 40 days. There's no risk when you shop. Their team always has your back with personal and fast support. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. Head to shadyrays.com and use code PHLY for 35% off sunglasses. Try for yourself. The shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. And I mentioned I'm trying to get all PHLY, 300,000 people reading us and rating it 5 stars. A big way we're doing that is by having Les Bowen write for us.
Right.
And you can read Les's work. You can read Bo Wolf's work. You can read my work. You can read Charlie O'Connor and Kyle Newbeck and Derek Brodner. I saw Derek come in. We have an outstanding stat. You can read Jim Salisbury. You can read some of John Foley's work is also for diehard members. You can read all of that, but you have to be a diehard member. And being a diehard member gives you access to premium written content. I might be biased, but I would not be saying it if I didn't believe it. I think our staff is as strong as most, as most staffs you can find in terms of the level of depth, the level of insight, the writing quality. From Eagles practice yesterday, we have 3 columns up there already. We're going to continue to have comprehensive coverage, but it's not just the premium written content that you get if you're a diehard member. You also get 20% off our events. You get a free shirt when you become a member.
I never got my free shirt, and I am a member.
I know who you can talk to about that, okay? And we will take care of that for you because we have great merchandise for all teams, even the city as well. So people are, and you get 20% off all merchandise too if you're a diehard member. So look, you get enough stuff. It pays for itself in addition to the outstanding content that you're going to read. People ask all the time how they can support PHLY. The answer is this. Head over to allphly.com now and join the best sports fans in the city.
Now, Zach, while you were reading that, I was looking at our crawl there from our supporters, and there's an extensive discussion of grocery store sushi.
Okay.
Maybe we should get a sushi sponsor here.
I like the way you think. Yes. Yeah. And I promise you, I will eat it, and I will endorse it, and I will give you the Mark Semino's story. Yeah. Where's your favorite sushi?
Well, there are a bunch of takeouts in generally we do takeout. Sometimes we go to a place. There's Fuji in Haddonfield.
Yes.
There's the place in sort of Moorestown. What's the Yamamoto or something like that.
Sagami's in South Jersey.
Sagami is unfortunately the lady that ran that just passed away.
I received that message.
They're closed at the moment. We're hoping they get reopened again.
That's one of Jeffrey Lurie's favorites.
That's the OG sushi of South Jersey. But we're very fortunate where I live in South Jersey to have a lot of Little Tokyo is good. Mega Sushi is good. There's a lot of good sushi in South Jersey, I'll have you know. Comes right out of the Delaware River.
Look at that.
And the Cooper.
Yeah, I love sushi in Philly, in the Philly burbs, in the Philly grocery stores. But my favorite sushi is at a place called Sugarfish. It is in LA. Whenever I get off the plane at LAX, I go there, and they have something called a Gotta Have It, which is you pay $35, and it's like a 5-course, sushi, sashimi. It is awesome. So I can tell you this: anyone who's going to the Eagles-Rams game, if you want to randomly bump into me, because I've tried to randomly show up sometimes when I know a player's going to be somewhere. If you want to randomly show up and see me, you can hang out at the Sugarfish in Marina Del Rey or in Santa Monica, and I will run into you. I promise you that, because I love Sugarfish sushi. That's a good deviation, though. I don't know what Jordan Davis's opinion on sushi is, but I know Jordan Davis is eating healthier. Yeah. Because Jordan Davis is in much better shape. A matter of fact, let me tell you this anecdote here. Vic Fangio, in the defensive meeting room yesterday, singled out to the whole group the bend with which Jordan Davis played. And he said that he had not seen Jordan Davis play like that before. And this is important to point out because I asked Jordan about this. I said, Jordan, I don't know what it's like to be 6'6", 330. That might, or 350. That might be a surprise to people. Like, it's easy for us to talk about bend. What's the challenge at bending at that size?
Right.
And he acknowledged this is hard for him. But if he plays tall, he's out of the play, basically.
Yes.
And so this is, and a lot of the bend for him comes down to conditioning, right? And him working. So it's not just technique, but it's conditioning. He says that, he's not where he wants to be right now, but he's better than he was in the spring, and he's getting to where he wants to be.
Yeah, I would imagine it's a little bit like weightlifting, where if you're in really good shape, you can get that deep, pull and then come back up. Whereas if you're not in as good a shape, you're going to do a little bit, you're going to kind of.
I need Joey's opinion on that one.
Yeah. But Jordan Davis, the one thing that bothers me, Zach, this is year 3.
Yes.
And if you go back and read the stories from last year's training camp about Jordan Davis, what were they about?
Being in shape. You're absolutely right.
What great shape he was in. Well, I mean, I don't doubt that he's in great shape right now, but is he going to be in great shape in October, November, December? Yep. That's really, and there's no way to know that right now, but clearly that has not been the case through 2 full NFL seasons.
You're absolutely right there. Real quick, Matthew Motti in the chat. I see your note. I owe you an email response. I promise you I will respond to your email tonight or tomorrow morning, but I will take care of that signed copy for you.
Yes.
And for all the audio
Busy
listeners
man
right now.
Here. Get off his case.
Yeah, for all the audio listeners, they probably enjoy a nice esoteric mention to the chat about an email you need to respond to. But Jordan Davis, look, I think he's looked solid so far in camp.
I want him to do well. He's from my hometown of Charlotte, North Carolina.
There you go, Mecklenburg County, right?
Yes.
And so the Eagles, he knows a lot's expected of him. Okay, and I think you hit it on the head though. It's similar to talking about the running backs catching the ball out of the backfield. I can tell you everything I see in practice in July. I can tell you everything he's saying in August. What I can't tell you is how he's going to look in November and December. Yes. And that's really the test. Because I do think week 1, week 4, week 6, Jordan Davis is going to look good. Yeah. He looked good last year.
He did.
And I think you're going to continue to see progress from him as long as he doesn't get hurt. But what you want to see is how he looks like as the season progresses. Another player on that defensive front who I keyed in on at practice today, and I should give you like inside practice notes on it, but honestly, you're not seeing much when you watch these practices without pads on from the defensive front. But it's fascinating to watch Bryce Huff. And I'm going to read a quote here from Vic Fangio. Bryce Huff, who the Eagles signed essentially to replace Hassan Reddick. Hassan Reddick was still on the team then, but the Eagles knew Reddick wasn't coming back at that number. They were going to trade Reddick. Right. They signed Bryce Huff to be a top edge rusher for them. They paid him $17 million plus a year, right? I know that's not $28, $30 million that Reddick might want, but $17 million a year is more than what Reddick was getting last year.
Right.
Still puts him among the top 20 in the league at his position.
For a guy who doesn't really have that resume.
Yeah, and so Bryce Huff, someone who, if you watch us every day, going into free agency, I said this is a player who I think the Eagles are going to target. This is a player I think the Eagles should target. He has legitimate pass rush ability. But the question with him is that he's been a situational pass rusher, right? He only, the most he's played in season is like 400 plus snaps.
And before last year, he wasn't anything special, right?
Exactly. So Vic Fangio was asked about Bryce Huff becoming an every down player. And Vic said, and quote, everyone thought he could. And knowing the floor was rush downs, and he's taken the challenge on very well. He has the talent to do what we want him to do. It's just he's got to get familiar with doing it. It'll be a work in progress. Does he look like he can do it today? No. But I think eventually he will. First off, I love the honesty. It's refreshing. Yeah. What do you make of that perspective from Vic Fangio?
I would love to know what he's talking about because, as you said, they're not in pads. He's not tackling anybody. Yeah. So how do you know that he's not there yet?
So
is he not lining up right on rush downs?
Well, so his point was this: he has the talent to do it, but he's never been asked to do it. He didn't do it with the Jets.
So maybe he's thinking he's not there in terms of what he showed me on film as a New York Jet. Okay,
and through 2 days here, he's still He's not at the. He says it's new, and he's got to become more proficient at it. I mean, it's like me trying to be a host, right?
Right. You're doing very well with
that's
that.
nice of you to say, but I'm still not proficient at it. So yeah, similar to that and so Bryce Huff. Now Bryce Huff, spoke to him after practice as well, and he says this is something he can do. He's played on early downs before. It's not as if he only played on third downs. He said it was just because of the depth that they had with the Jets, right? The players they had there. It's not something he was asked to do as frequently, but he's confident he can. He says he's a physical player. He thinks that's really important. But as far as what I see when I watch him in practice is, I don't mean to make the comparison to Hassan Reddick, but it's a worthy comparison to make for two reasons. First off, he's directly replacing Hassan Reddick, and second off, there's like this idea that Howie pulled, Howie won. Howie did a great thing here.
The fact that it all has to do with the Jets, the Reddick going there, Huff coming here. Yeah. It's almost like a 1-for-1 trade.
And from a team building perspective. I agree with what Howie did. I understand what Howie did.
3.5 years younger.
Yeah, and he was able to reallocate that money, right? And they were able to sign Devontae Smith to an extension, sign Jordan Mailata to an extension. Hassan Reddick still isn't in Jets camp because he wants to be paid one of the top guys.
That's a fascinating situation. Yeah. I'm sure you guys have discussed it, but
so Hassan Reddick's older, wants to be paid he wants to be one of the top paid edge rushers in the league. The Eagles get future draft pick compensation for him, and they get money they can reallocate. But it's not all about off-season mechanics. Like, what matters, too, is how the player is on the field. And I think there is a delta between Hassan Reddick and Bryce Huff. And I understand.
Oh, yeah.
Pads aren't on right now. I get it. And if you go into the first 2 days of Hassan Reddick's practices in 2022, the questions were to Jonathan Gannon, why is he dropping in the coverage? But when you see Hassan Reddick rush around the edge, he has the bend. He has the speed around the edge that's just rare. And with Bryce Huff,
and even for a guy who's not that big, he's physical. I mean, he doesn't. It's not just speed. I mean, he has a good wallop to him when he hits that tackle too.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I know it's 2 practices, so don't say I'm making like a mountain out of something I shouldn't. But I don't see that same type of ability through 2 practices.
But it's hard. The thing with Hassan Reddick, and the whole thing is fascinating to me because the Super Bowl season 2 years ago, he might have been the best pass rusher for the Eagles I've ever seen. Now I didn't cover Reggie White or anybody like that.
No, but you saw some really good.
Hugh Douglas,
Javon Curse, Trent Cole.
That was 17 sacks. And he was in the backfield constantly. I was amazed at how good he was. And he was not as good last year for whatever reason. I know he was ticked about the contract, but you're not going to get – I mean, if Bryce Huff can get you 17 sacks, then he's going to want a new contract too.
Sure.
I don't think you're going to get to that level. I think you have to make up those plays among a group of people.
Sure.
And that's going to be very difficult. I mean, I really think Eagles fans can crow over the Jets not being able to get Hassan to come to camp and whether Hassan has really, gone off the deep end here. But him not being here is a significant loss that is very, very hard to make up. It really is.
Well said. And so a few things to build off there. First off, Jordan Mailata, after practice, when he was asked about Bryce Huff, he brought up what we've been talking about. It's hard to judge this in pads. He really likes Bryce Huff's get off. Okay, which is important for an edge rusher, like how quick you are off the ball, and he has shown that on tape. But like I said, they had, especially in 2022 when there were 70 sacks, they were elite in getting to the quarterback. And if they are mediocre at getting to the quarterback, and it's not just Bryce Huff, but it doesn't matter to me what you do on your back end, what you do, who the linebackers are. I think
they have to get really good pressure up the middle from those guys we were just talking about.
Exactly. Jalen Carter in particular.
Right.
And then Josh Sweat on the other side, Haven't seen enough through 2 days that tell you he's back or he's shot. I did ask Vic Fangio.
Still a really important player.
Huge player for them. Huge player for them. And I asked Vic Fangio, like, what indicators you're looking for to show that he is the player he was 2 years ago. And Vic said it's mainly movement, right? I think the workload is something they're going to monitor with Josh Sweat, but it's how well he moves. And that's really what Vic's looking for there. And there are times when, for instance, I see Josh Sweat dropping in the coverage here. That's probably not the way you want to use him, but it's a way to evaluate the movement ability. But like Bo and I have talked about, Nolan Smith is a big part of this too. And the Eagles need Nolan Smith to be a difference maker around the edge.
And boy, that just, that we saw no sign of that as a rookie, but not everybody who doesn't show a great sign as a rookie turns out to be a bust. It's just that it would have been nice to have seen something more from him as a rookie. With Josh Sweat, you have been in the locker room as I have. Josh Sweat is a specimen.
Yes.
I mean, physically, if you wanted to, if you're doing a movie and the guy is like an elite defensive lineman, this would be the guy that you'd show in the locker room with his shirt off. I mean, he's built. He's got the narrow waist, the long legs, the arms, the chest. I mean, obviously, he would have been a very high draft pick had he not blown up his knee in high school.
Yeah, you spoke to his father.
And took 3 years to come back from that. But there's nothing physically that keeps him. I think at this point, I think his knee's okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing physically that keeps him from being as good as anybody. He's an enigma to me. He really is.
Yeah, Bo teases me about, the way I kind of talk about Josh Sweat. And my answer to that is this isn't me like sitting here saying like I'm a football GM. This is me talking to Lane Johnson. This is me talking to Chris Long. This is me talking to like people in that locker room who when I ask early in the career, about this guy, about that guy, they say the same thing. They're like, this guy is just rare. He has tools that you can't teach, right? He does things you can't teach. And as I've said, from the middle of 2022 to the middle of 2023, he was among the top 5 in the league in sacks during that period. He fell off a cliff last year. The league spoke about what they thought about him when the Eagles couldn't trade him for what they wanted to. But his baseline has been like 6.5 sacks. I think that the ceiling is still there. He's still young. He's 27 years old, right? And I think Josh Sweat's a player who people aren't paying enough attention to, and you know this well. It's a contract year, and so in contract years, it can go one of two ways. Sometimes it can affect someone in a detrimental way, and sometimes it could be like, all right, if I want to get paid, this is the year I got to put it all together. And the Eagles needed to be the latter in Josh Sweat's case.
That's absolutely true, especially since you don't know what you have in Nolan Smith yet. And, it's that edge is going to – that's maybe an overlooked point of possible problems for the Eagles, I think.
And so to tie this all together, I am curious in the sense that you covered Jim Johnson, you covered Jim Schwartz. You covered Juan Castillo. You covered Sean McDermott. Like you've covered a spectrum of defensive coordinators.
Let's not forget Bill Davis.
Yeah, Bill Davis, a very nice man.
Wonderful.
As we kind of wrap this all up, what are you looking for from Vic Fangio, and do you think that he can make the market difference with this group?
I think he can, because for me the bar is pretty low because last year was almost like having Juan Castillo and Jim Washburn out there when you had Matt Patricia and Sean Desai. And I've said this several times. There was a game where one of the commentators said it looked like the linebackers, and the secondary were all playing 3 different schemes.
Sure.
When somebody says that on TV, that's bad.
Very bad, yep.
So I don't think Vic Fangio has to clear a real high bar. Just getting this organized and making it look like they're playing an actual NFL defense would be one step. That would be very positive here. Now, I'm a little concerned about the problem he had in Miami because he is an older guy. He's almost as old as me. 3 years, I think, difference.
I think you keep young. You're hip. Right?
But he, some of those guys in Miami really didn't like his old school ways. And that can be, despite all the plaudits and all the success he's had over the decades, there's a reason why Mike Keenan doesn't coach NHL teams anymore. There's a reason.
Sure. There's why Bill Belichick might not be coaching this year, too.
That's exactly right. I mean, everybody's saying the right things now. All the players are like, oh, he's an old school guy. I grew up with coaches like that. It's all just wonderful. But if they lose a few games and he's, getting in guys' faces and sitting them on the bench and they're not getting reps and they're, it can change.
Sure.
And I'm real curious about how that's going to go. But I think in terms of just organizing the defense and making it coherent, I have no question that he will do that.
Those in the chat, you can roll your eyes when I say this because I know some of you rolled your eyes earlier when we talked about Jalen and Nick, but it's similar to Jalen and Nick in that if the Eagles win, then Vic Fangio, this personality is exactly what the team needs. They needed this old school approach, like they respond to that. And if the team loses, it's going to be the opposite. It's going to be he can't connect with the players
that way anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. So really, it's going to be result dependent. We look forward to chronicling that. Before we do, though, we have a lot of practices to get into. Tomorrow's not one of them. The Eagles have a walkthrough tomorrow, closed to reporters. Bo and I will be talking at 2 p.m. We'll be catching up on the first 2 days and looking ahead of what's to come. The Eagles are off on Saturday. They're on the practice field. No, I'm sorry. They are practicing on Saturday. Mm-hmm. They are off on Sunday, and then they're back Monday next week. So that's the schedule. So we will have all your updates on allphly.com. I'm going to have a write-up tonight off of some of the notes from today. You can continue to monitor us throughout the weekend. I have a short up what's it called, Julia? Camp in 60 seconds? Yeah, Camp in 60 seconds. We're doing that every day. You can see that on social. You can see that on YouTube. And look forward to having Les's columns on allphly.com, Bo's coverage on allphly.com, and this show every day at 2 p.m. So until tomorrow, Bo would say, as always, we love you. I would say we'll do better tomorrow. Thank you for watching.
We all silly like the mayor.